That night when she took the stage, her mother was sitting in the audience, but what Amy was about to do would shock everyone. The lights dimmed at the Shepherd's Bush Empire in London. The crowd fell silent. Amy Winehouse walked onto the stage wearing a black dress that hugged her fragile frame, her iconic beehive hair towering above her like a crown of controlled chaos. She held the microphone loosely, almost carelessly, as if it were just another cigarette between her fingers. Her eyes scanned the room, searching. And then they stopped. Row 7, seat 12. There she was. Janis Winehouse. Her mother. Amy's face didn't change, but something inside her did. The audience didn't know it yet, but they were about to witness something that would stay with them forever. Subscribe now because what happens next will completely change how you see Amy Winehouse. 3 hours before the concert, backstage was chaos. Makeup artists rushed around, sound technicians tested equipment, managers shouted into phones. Amy sat alone in her dressing room, staring at a photograph. It was old, faded at the edges. A picture of her as a little girl, maybe 5 years old, sitting on her mother's lap. Both of them were laughing. Amy's hand trembled as she held it. Her mother had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis 2 years earlier. The disease was progressing. Every day, Janis Winehouse lost a little more of herself. Her hands shook. Her balance faltered. Her strength faded. And Amy felt helpless. Completely, utterly helpless. She had tried everything. Visits to specialists. Experimental treatments. Prayer, though she wasn't sure who she was praying to. Nothing worked. Nothing could stop the slow, cruel theft of her mother's body. So Amy did the only thing she knew how to do. She sang. She poured her pain into melodies. She transformed her anguish into art. But tonight was different. Tonight, her mother would be in the audience. Tonight, Amy wanted to give her something more than just a performance. She wanted to give her a moment. A memory. Something that would last beyond the disease, beyond the pain, beyond everything. Amy Winehouse suddenly made a decision backstage that would shock everyone around her. Her manager knocked on the door. 5 minutes, Amy. She didn't respond. She just kept staring at that photograph. Then she folded it carefully, placed it in her pocket, and stood up. When she walked toward the stage, her band noticed something different about her. Her usual swagger was gone. Instead, there was a quiet determination. A focus. She wasn't walking toward a performance. She was walking towards something sacred. The concert began exactly as planned. Amy opened with "Addicted," her voice raw and powerful, cutting through the room like broken glass dipped in honey. The audience was mesmerized. They always were. But Amy wasn't performing for them. Not really. Every note, every word, every breath was aimed at one person. Row 7, seat 12. Her mother watched with tears already forming in her eyes. She knew her daughter's voice better than anyone. She had heard it change over the years, from a little girl singing in the kitchen to a woman pouring her soul out for thousands. But tonight there was something different. Something Janis couldn't quite name yet. 4 songs in, Amy paused. The band kept playing a soft instrumental. She walked to the edge of the stage and looked directly at her mother. The audience noticed. Whispers rippled through the crowd. What was happening? Why had she stopped singing? Amy's hand went to her pocket. She pulled out the photograph. Even from the stage, even with her vision blurred by tears, she could see it clearly in her mind. That little girl. That mother. That laughter. "Mom," Amy said into the microphone, her voice cracking. The entire venue went silent. You could hear people breathing. "Mom, I know you're tired. I know it's hard. I know some days you don't want to fight anymore." Janis covered her mouth with her hand, tears streaming down her face. The people around her didn't know whether to look away or bear witness. "But I need you to know something," Amy continued. "Everything I am, everything I'll ever be, started with you. And tonight I want to give you something back. But here's the part no one expected, the part that changed everything. Amy turned to her band and said something the microphone didn't catch. The drummer nodded. The guitarist adjusted his strings. And then they began to play a song that wasn't on the set list. It wasn't one of Amy's hits. It wasn't even one of her own songs. It was Moody's Mood for Love, a jazz standard that Janis used to sing to Amy when she was a child. When Amy couldn't sleep. When she was scared. When the world felt too big and too cruel. Janis would hold her close and sing that song, and somehow everything would be okay. The first note that came out of Amy's mouth shattered something in that room. It wasn't the voice of a superstar. It was the voice of a daughter. Vulnerable. Desperate. Loving. She sang every word directly to her mother, and as she sang, something extraordinary happened. Janis, despite the tremors in her hands, despite the weakness in her body, began to mouth the words along with her daughter. They were singing together. Across the distance of the stage and the seats. Across the years of pain and struggle. Across the impossible weight of a diagnosis that had no cure. They were singing together. The audience realized they were witnessing something private. Something that wasn't meant for them. Some looked away out of respect. Others couldn't stop watching. Many cried. A woman in the third row sobbed openly, thinking of her own mother who had passed away the year before. A man in the balcony gripped his wife's hand tighter, grateful she was still healthy, still here. An elderly couple near the back held each other, remembering when they too were young and the world was full of songs. Amy's voice broke multiple times during the song. She didn't try to hide it. She didn't try to be perfect. She just kept singing. And when she reached the final verse, she did something no one expected. She walked off the stage. Security moved to stop her, but her manager waved them off. Amy walked down the steps, through the aisle, directly to row 7. She knelt in front of her mother, and sang the last lines of the song while holding both of Janis's trembling hands. There I go, there I go, there I go, pretty baby, you are the soul who snaps my control. The band played the final notes. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. And then Janis pulled her daughter close and whispered something in her ear. No one else heard it. No one else needed to. Whatever was said in that moment belonged only to them. When Amy stood up, her face was wet with tears, but she was smiling. A real smile. Not the guarded, defensive smile she wore for cameras. A smile of pure, unfiltered love. Share this story with someone who needs to remember the power of love. And subscribe because the ending will show you why this moment mattered more than any award Amy ever won. Amy walked back to the stage. The audience erupted into applause, but she raised her hand for silence. My mom, she said, her voice steadier now, taught me that music isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest. It's about showing up for the people you love, even when you're broken. Especially when you're broken. She paused, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Multiple sclerosis is trying to take her from me. Piece by piece. Day by day. But it can't take this. It can't take what we just had. No disease can touch that. The rest of the concert was different. Amy sang with a freedom she hadn't felt in years. The audience sang with her. They weren't spectators anymore. They were participants. They were part of something bigger. When she performed Back to Black, the entire venue sang the chorus, and Amy stepped back from the microphone, letting them carry the melody. She looked at her mother, who was singing too, her voice weak but determined, and Amy thought, this is what matters. Not the album sales. Not the Grammy nominations. Not the headlines. This. Right here. Right now. After the final song, as the crowd gave a standing ovation, Amy took one more moment. She pulled something out of her pocket. A cigarette? No. The photograph. She held it up so her mother could see it, even from the distance. Janis understood. She nodded. And Amy placed it on the stage right at the front, where it would stay for the rest of the tour. A reminder. Every night, before every show, Amy would look at that photograph and remember what she was really singing for. Backstage, after the concert, Janis came to Amy's dressing room. Her movements were slow, labored. The disease made every step a negotiation. But she made it. Amy rushed to help her sit down. "You didn't have to do that," Janis said softly. "Yes, I did," Amy replied. "I needed you to know. I needed everyone to know." They sat together in silence for a long time, the kind of silence that says more than words ever could. Finally, Janis spoke. "When you were little, I used to worry about how big your heart was. I thought the world would break it." She touched Amy's face gently. "But tonight, I realized something. Your heart isn't fragile. It's your greatest strength. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise." That night changed Amy. The people who knew her well noticed it immediately. She started calling her mother more often. She visited more frequently. She wrote songs that were less about pain and more about gratitude. She wasn't healed, she still struggled, she still fought her demons, but she had reconnected with something essential. A reason. A purpose beyond the fame and the chaos. Her mother. 3 months later, Amy recorded a private album. Just 10 songs. She never released it commercially. It was made for an audience of one. She sent it to her mother with a note. "For the days when you need to remember you're not alone. For the days when the disease feels too heavy. For the days when you forget how strong you are. Play this. And know that I'm singing to you. Always." Janis played that album every single day. Even on her worst days. Especially on her worst days. The story of that night at Shepherd's Bush Empire spread beyond the people who were there. Fans shared it online. Music journalists wrote about it. But the truth is, no written word could fully capture what happened in that room. You had to be there. You had to feel the air change when Amy sang to her mother. You had to see the way a daughter's love became something tangible, something real, something that could stand against disease and fear and time itself. Years later, when people talk about Amy Winehouse, they often focus on the tragedy. The addiction. The tablets. The too early death. But those who were at Shepherd's Bush Empire that night remember something different. They remember a moment of pure humanity. They remember a daughter who stopped a concert to honor her mother. They remember music being used not as entertainment, but as medicine. As prayer. As love made audible. The impact of that night rippled far beyond the venue walls. A young woman named Sarah, who had been in the audience that evening, went home and called her own mother for the first time in 3 years. They had fought over something Sarah couldn't even remember anymore. But watching Amy sing to Janis made her realize how precious time was. How fragile. How easily it could slip away. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said when her mother answered. "I've been stupid. Can we start over?" They talked for 2 hours that night. And every week after that. A music teacher in the balcony went back to his classroom the next day and changed his entire curriculum. He had been teaching technique, theory, perfection. But Amy had taught him something else that night. Music wasn't about hitting the right notes. It was about connecting. About vulnerability. About using sound to touch someone's soul. He started teaching his students to sing with honesty, not just accuracy. Many of them wrote to thank him years later, saying it changed their lives. Even the venue staff were affected. A security guard named Marcus had worked hundreds of concerts. He had seen every kind of performance, every type of artist. But he had never seen anything like that night. When Amy walked through the crowd to her mother, Marcus had tears in his eyes. He went home and hugged his own mother tighter than he had in years. He told her he loved her. Something he hadn't said out loud since he was a child. "I know, baby," she said. "I always knew." That photograph Amy placed on the stage. It stayed there for every show she performed afterward. And after Amy died, Janis kept it. She keeps it still. On days when the multiple sclerosis makes her forget things, makes her hands shake too much to hold a cup, makes her body betray her in 1,000 small ways, she looks at that photograph. She remembers that little girl. She remembers that concert. She remembers her daughter singing to her, for her, because of her. And for a moment, the disease doesn't matter. The loss doesn't matter. What matters is that once, in a small venue in London, love one. Even if just for one song. Even if just for one night. Love one. And no disease, no tragedy, no ending could ever take that away.